Hello and welcome back to another episode of Let's Build an E-commerce Store with the Spring Boot Backend. Episode 7, we're going to be doing some basic starter endpoints. So let's think about today's objectives. Firstly, we're going to load some sample data into our database to work with. Secondly, we're going to create some basic endpoints to get the data and retrieve it to present it to the front end. And then finally, we're going to test to ensure the correct data is being presented when we query these endpoints. So there's our objectives. Let's get straight into it. Okay, so here we are back in our development environment. So the first objective today is to add some dummy developer data into the database so that when you query for orders or products, there's something that's actually going to come out compared to just being, oh well, you've queried for it but there's no data. So to facilitate this, I have created a little SQL script. So in the root of the repository next to where the POM XML file is, I've created this insert dummy dev data SQL file. What we're going to want to do is we're going to want to open our SQL Server Management Studio and just drag that file into it, which will open it up. Now this has it's going to add several bits of data for us. So we've got 5 different products here. We've got the inventory of those 5 products. We're going to add a address for each user of the 2 users that we're going to have. We're going to then create 5 orders and then set a bunch of quantities for those orders. So what this needs is you to have 2 users registered into the system. So if I go in my local user table here, we can see I only have 1 at the moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into Postman and go into our register endpoint that we had before. I'm just going to make another user, so that'll be user 2, and send that. And obviously you need the application running to be able to do that. So that would help. So here we are, wait for that to start. And hit send. And there we go, status 200. So if I now execute this again, we can see that now I have 2. So what you need to do is you need to take the 2 IDs of the users that you want to create this data on. Because remember, when you have an order, the order is associated with the user, same with the address. So I've got ID 8 and ID 9. So in the top here, you can see we've got user ID 1 and user ID 2. We're going to set that to 8 and 9. So that's the only thing that you actually have to change inside of this file. Please note that this section here will go through and delete everything out of these tables, just because some of these tables have unique keys. For example, you can't have 2 products with the same name. So the reason we're deleting is in case that we've run this script twice. Now, if you don't want to do that, obviously you can comment out or remove this section here, but you've got to consider about what the side effects of doing that is. Because if you have product number 1 there already in the database, you try run that line, it's not going to work. So yeah, so here we've got our little script that we've got. So I've changed our little IDs up here, and I'm just going to hit execute at the top. As you can see, it's got loads of rows affected, and I've got query execute successfully. If I come into web order quantities, which is obviously the biggest table that we're going to have, we can see that it's all filled out correctly. It doesn't seem to have any problems, although the fact that this all says quantity 5, but I think that's just because, yeah, they all are set to quantity 5. So obviously maybe change those if you want it. But yeah, so that now is objective 1. We've got some data in to work with. So let's go back to IntelliJ, and we're going to now create some DAOs to be able to access. So our starter endpoints, we're going to have 2 endpoints. We're going to have one that shows all of the products available, and another one that's going to show all of the orders for the user that's signed in. So we've got our local user, a DAO. Now before, what we've been implementing is the CRUD repository, but we're going to actually change this to be the list CRUD repository instead now, because the CRUD repository itself, if you look at the find all method, it returns the iterable interface, which is an interface that's implemented as a list. But we want to use the list for the other methods when we do the find all. So by using the list CRUD repository, we guarantee that that is the type coming out. There's not something else that might come in and change that. And also the added benefit is that there's no casting required as well. So we're going to use list CRUD repository for now. So we're going to make two new DAOs. We need a order DAO, or sorry, web order DAO. That's going to be an interface, and that extends the list CRUD repository with the types web order and long. I'll just import that there. And then we need another one for the product, so we're going to make a product DAO, and that's also going to extend the list CRUD repository using products and long as the types. Obviously, this first one is the entity that your repository is based on. The second one is the type of the primary key that you query upon. In our web order one, now what we want to consider is when I query for a list of orders, I should only see my orders, not somebody else's orders. So we're going to use our little JPA palette over here to do a find collection. We want to look for a list of web orders, and our little condition here is where the user is equal to whatever we give it. So we can come here and that generates that, and that's what that little method stub looks like. So list web user, find by user, and then the local user. So that's our DAOs now done. So again, we're going to follow our little pattern of MVC, and we're going to create a service here. So we're going to have the order service, and that's going to have at service as the annotation. We're going to hold the web order DAO at the top here, and add it as a constructor to inject it by Spring. And then we're going to have a public list of web order, and it will just be called get orders, and you have to supply a local user instance to be able to query for those orders. So that just returns web order.dao find by user. Okay, and then another service we need is for the product, so we can go product service, annotate it with at service, and then we've got private product DAO, and again have Spring inject that using the constructor, and then we have public list of products. There we go. And we call it get products, and that returns the product DAO find all method, because that will find all the products and return them, because products aren't user specific. Okay, so there we go. We've got our two services. Next, we need to create a new package under API controller. So we're going to call that one order, and inside there we're going to create our new order controller. So this is where the REST API stuff comes in. So we go at REST controller and at request mapping. The mapping describes the path, which we're going to do /order for. And then we're going to have we need to have our order service to hand. So again, have Spring inject that for us using the constructor. And then we need our get mapping. We're not going to supply anything in here because we're just going to use the /order as the prefix for that. And that's going to go public list of web order. And we're just going to call it get orders. and that's going to return order service dot get orders, and oh, we need that local user. But if you remember from the last episode, it's using the @authentication principle we can obtain the user instance, because we've stored it in the security context, and Spring will pull that out, get the principle of the authentication object, and put it in there for us. So there we go, nice and simple. And then we just kind of do the same sort of thing for product. So a new package called product, and we call a Java class called product controller, and we annotate that with @rest controller and @request mapping. The mapping would say /product, and then we got another get mapping with no parameters because we just went on the root. We go public list of product, and we call that, oh, cool. Why isn't it working? Oh, there we go. It's all enter to do that, by the way. Get products, and then we just return up, but forget we need our product service. So private product service has Spring injected using the constructor for us, and then we just do product service dot get products. Nice and simple, that one, compared to the other one. Okay, so now we have our kind of outline. The one thing we do need to consider is obviously the same way we had our local user before. It loads all the addresses when it loads the local user, and when you return that to JSON, you don't need the addresses in that. So if we think about our orders, well, the orders hold the quantities, but then the quantities also hold the order, and you can see how that's going to become a revolving resolution when the Jackson stuff, which is the library that converts Java objects to JSON, when it goes in to go, oh right, okay, so I've got an order object and I've got quantities inside that, so I'm going to now look in those quantities, and what do they contain? They contain an order, so I'm going to put the order in, and you can see that's going to continuously go over and over and over again. So in the order quantities, we know that we're never going to need the JSON to represent the order from the quantity, so we can put that @JSON ignore that we're familiar with at the top there. And then I believe inside product, there might be something here we want to tell it to ignore as well. The inventory, yes, because the inventory, we don't want to ignore the inventory. The inventory has the product, and we want the inventory to ignore the product, so we can just go @JSON ignore. Oh, and in fact, actually no, we don't need that. Do we need that? Oh, I think we do. So we're gonna put JSON ignore on the product inside of the inventory. So if we reboot that now, this should give us some new endpoints to play around with. So we're going to open up Postman. We're going to look at our latest one, the auth/me that we did from the last episode. We're going to duplicate that tab, and we're going to call it /orders. But for now, we're going to disable our token in the authorization tab and hit send. And as you can see, this order should be. If I send that now, you can see I get an empty array list because there is no user associated to my session. If I go back to the bearer token, this is my first user. So if I hit send now, you can see I get a bunch of data here. So I get the ID of the order, the user of the order, the address of the order, and see the address contains the user. So you see that's another thing that we need to fix. So if we go into address, we can come up here and go @JSON ignore above the user. And if we quickly restart that, we'll see that load in the background. Come on, there we go. If we resend this now, see the address no longer contains the user, so we've not got that redundant information in there, which is good. So, and then we've got the quantities of these orders, so you can see we've got quantity ID 6 has a product number 3. It holds 5 of them, and we can see as we go down here, we've got the same sort of thing over and over again. But the one common thing that we're seeing here is that the user associated with the orders is always ID 8. So you've got ID 8 there, you've got ID 8 there, and ID 8 there. We don't see any of ID 9's orders, which is what we want to see. So we've tested to evaluate that when I look at my orders, I'm only seeing my orders, not someone else's. And then we can also do the same again. So if we duplicate that tab and look at product and send that through, you can see we get a list of all of the products that can be purchased. So that's brilliant. And again, we can turn off the authorization. And because this is a endpoint that doesn't matter about authentication, because you don't need to be necessarily logged in to see the products, I can resend this, and you can see I can still see all of the products in all their glory, along with their inventory as well. So there we go. We've started up our basic endpoints. This gives us something to start thinking about how to work on. Like I said, this is kind of like a middle episode between the two security parts, because we needed some endpoints to be able to write the security about. So I hope that you enjoyed. We've done our 3 objectives. We've got some dev data inside the database to work with. We've got our endpoints constructed, and we've also tested those endpoints to make sure they're valid. So I hope you all enjoyed. And as always, in my channel, there's a playlist with all the videos available in one section. You can see in the description links to the GitHub repository to see the before and after. This little SQL script is going to be in the after one, not the before one. So it will be the branch that's named episode 7. So feel free to go into that one. Obviously, if you're not using SQL Server, that SQL may not work for you, so you might have to do your own little bit of SQL data building, either inside your own SQL writing or within like a database builder tool like SQL Server Management Studio. But yes, thank you very much for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next episode.